You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories about God speaking and his people having just enough faith to believe him and obey. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 3, Episode 8. Well, hey friends, I'm so happy that you have joined us this week on Feathers. Thank you for taking the time to do that. This week we have Wendy Speake, and I have been following Wendy online. She's a blogger for several years now, and very excited that I got to meet her at the Illume conference last fall, and surprised to find out she actually has 2 books coming out this year, and hoping to get her on the podcast for both of them. But this week, it's all about her first book called Triggers, and it's really all about helping moms deal with their anger in parenting. And man, I do struggle with that, particularly in the last couple of years as my kids have gotten older, and also as we've adopted. It's just really surprised me, the anger that has come out, and just so thankful for this book. And I really think it's just so important that we are obedient to Christ in these small moments where we really can react in such poor, unchristian-like ways. And yet that's not the call that we have from God. And we can be faithful in those small moments and obedient to his word. So very excited to talk through some of those issues and the way that they have addressed them in the book. So here's my conversation with Wendy Speake. Wendy, welcome to Feathers today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. How about we start off and you can introduce yourself and your family and what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm a mom and I'm a wife. I'm married to Matt, and we live in San Diego. We've been married for 15 years almost, and we have 3 boys. And let's see, Caleb is 12 and Brody is 10. He's at church camp this weekend. And my little one is about to turn 8. And so that's real exciting. But you know, that little one, you really want to freeze them. you want to keep them little. So 8 feels like a really big boy year.
Yes.
So I find that I'm gaining confidence speaking to moms these days, because I'm realizing, like I'm on the backside of a lot of this, a lot of these issues of raising little ones. And I know that I'm entering a whole new realm as they become preteens and teenagers, but it's been a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying this season right now.
Yes, I love the elementary age. And there is something special, I think, about 8 years old. I feel like that goes from little to moving into that kind of mid-range elementary
big kid
age, I guess, because that's like a 3rd grade sort of. Is he 2nd or 3rd this
He's
year?
2nd right now, but he's reading what he calls chapter books, and they're not really meaty, but he's so proud of himself, and he goes to the skate park with his big brothers, and he's so proud of himself, and he's got his own style because he's the 3rd born, so he's so proud of himself.
Oh,
it's neat.
That's so cute. I love the brother. So we have 2 girls and 1 boy. So he's just tired of all the girls.
Well, my boys all like girls.
Oh,
they're not raised with them. They do ask, Mom, when are we going to adopt a little girl? When are we going to adopt a little girl? And man, isn't that a conversation for another day when your kids start asking to adopt a sister?
Oh yeah, so we've adopted Jacob, and Jacob actually asked us to adopt another boy so he can have a brother.
Oh yes, I love it. I love it that they get in this current Christian culture where people are starting to live out this commission to care for orphans. Like it's part of our children's conversation. It's part of their vocabulary. They know that adoption is something you do. I really love that.
Yes, it's actually interesting. My daughter just told me the other day that somebody at school, they were talking about Jacob, and the little girl said, well, he's not really your brother. And Lexi was like, yes, he is. He's my brother. Mm-hmm. And so we got to have the conversation like, yes, he's your brother. Like, we have papers. He's part of the family. So, yeah, it's definitely a part of the conversation. Like, even the families that don't adopt, they got a lot of people around them that are having these conversations.
Yeah.
So I love that we're talking about, parenting and adoption, because that's what we're going to talk about a lot today. And I'm excited to have you on because you actually have a new book out called Triggers, and it's all about parenting and the struggle with anger that we have in parenting. And I just feel like as women, one of the greatest calls that we have as women is to parent our children, and just how much faith it takes to, to make all the decisions that we need to make to be parents and actually to obey them, but also just living out our call as Christians in the role of a mother is just so difficult given all of the challenges that we have. And I think you guys have taken a slice of that and talk about the struggle that we have with anger.
Yeah, we found that lots of women are surprised by their anger. Some women come to it honestly. It was passed down generation after generation. But in our culture today, in and outside of the church, we believe that there's just an epidemic of angry parenting. And so we've taken this book and we've divided it into chapters, and each one's a different trigger. What are the things that set you off? What are the things that make you angry? Is it the shoes by the door? Is it the back talk? Is it that you're just so stinking exhausted and your husband is traveling, or you're doing it alone as a single mom? And we've just been so blessed to see women responding to it, because it's a conversation that's we've needed to happen.
Yeah, and I think I'm one of those that's been surprised by my anger. I'm generally a pretty easygoing person. Mm-hmm. I saw my anger probably the first time in potty training. I'm surprised you don't have a potty training chapter, because
there are so many chapters we don't have.
Oh, no, you have a lot of great chapters, and I love how you divided it. So you have like issues from your kids you might have, and then issues from yourself and environment that you might have. But yeah, potty training was a huge deal for me. I don't know why. And I still don't know why potty training just made me so angry. I'm like, oh, get this right. But I think after that was like the younger years, where I saw that. But actually, even since adopting, I have struggled with anger. And so I'm so thankful for this book. It really surprised me. I kind of expected to open the book and be like, oh, here's your 3 steps to, fixing your kids. But really the spotlight was on ourselves. Oh, and that's what I would love for you to talk about. I know you have learned some things in obedience. If you want to share, a story about that, and then we can talk about, some specific examples that you guys have.
Sure. Well, I have to say, in the writing of this book, don't we all want an easy formula? But we just were convicted from the get-go. This isn't, actually we were writing before we even realized how it was coming out. We're not telling women how to get their children to obey so that they don't have to be angry anymore, Mm-hmm. That's backwards. God is so much more concerned with our obedience to Him than our children's obedience to us. I mean, their obedience to us is going to be a precursor in their life to be obedient to Him, but we're the adults here. And He says, you obey me in these little moments. Anyway, so you asked me, do I have a story where I started learning these things in my own life? And I have to tell you, it's going to feel like I'm taking you down a rabbit hole, but come with me. I think it's really hard to fit in our lives right now with so many children, so many responsibilities, time to get away and really hear from the Lord. What would you have me do? I have a heart that wants to be obedient, but I don't even have time to sit and listen to you, Lord. I remember back in my youth, as early as 9th grade, I would go up to church camp, and I'd go to Forest Home, and I thought that conference center is where God lived, because when I would go there, I had such a sense of His presence, and I feel like I truly started hearing His voice as a child, because I would get away into the mountains, and we'd sing, and we'd have good teaching. And then when I was in college, I started practicing the Sabbath rest. And so I would finish all my homework on Saturday, so on Sunday I could go to church. And I went to college in Florida, and I would go out to this area, this strip of beach that was always empty. And I would walk with my Walkman. that dates me a little bit. Remember the precursor?
The Sony yellow one?
Yes, exactly. And, probably listening to Amy Grant or something.
Yeah.
And I would just hear from the Lord, and I'd spend time with Him there at the beach. Anyway, I got to this season of my life with all these little people always talking, and I felt so stressed all the time, and I didn't have a place where I was getting away to hear from Him. I would sneak in moments with him, but I just didn't have a consistent faith time to sit with him and hear from him. But every now and then I would go to the grocery store by myself, and God started talking to me on aisle 10 or at the checkout lane or at the meat counter. Anyway, I imagine one day I'm going to write a book called Grocery Stories, and there's all the ways in this season.
Grocery
You
stories.
like that? Do you like that?
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, actually, I hate the grocery store. So if I could hear from God in the grocery store, maybe
Maybe that would
I
make
would
it
like it a
better.
little bit more. I would do it more. I
It's
hate
not,
the
they're
grocery
not
store.
usually happy moments though. Like they're usually pretty awful moments, because I don't have good
Okay.
grocery store experiences either. But so this one day had been a really hard day, and it probably hadn't even been a hard day. It probably had been like a bunch of hard days, maybe even a hard month or a hard couple of months that were all bleeding together. And I had adrenal fatigue and hormonal imbalance and prolonged postpartum after the birth of my third child. And at this point, he's like 5 years old. So I should have moved past all this by this time. But anyway, I didn't know where one hard day stopped and the next one started. And my husband was traveling, and I was homeschooling all three of the boys. And I was plain worn out. So I go to the grocery store all by myself. And actually, I didn't even make it in the grocery store. I'm sitting there in the car just weeping, just bawling my eyes out, because, sometimes it just bubbles up, right? And out of you. And, but I had to get home and had to make dinner. My husband was home. And so I pulled myself together, and I checked myself out in the rearview mirror, and I was a mess, and my eyes were swollen from the crying. And I thought to myself, I totally remember this, I want to wear my big sunglasses so nobody's looking at me. I feel so exposed, like everybody's going to know how hard my day was because I look like I've been crying. But I didn't wear my sunglasses, and I walked in there, and I walked up to the meat counter. I just needed a few things. And Paul was standing behind the meat counter, because he had a big badge that said, Paul, hello, my name is Paul. And I said hi to Paul. And so he was standing there by the scallops and tilapia and stuff. And he says, what can I get for you? And I ordered salmon. And so he starts wrapping up salmon, and he says, so how you doing today? And I realized this man did not look at me. I mean, had he looked at me, he would know I am not doing well. I have had a hard day or a hard month or a hard string of months. And so I asked myself, what in the world am I supposed to say to this Paul behind the counter? Am I supposed to tell him, I'm fine, how are you? Or am I supposed to tell him the truth? So I decided the latter, and I told him, it's been a hard day. And he was wrapping up my salmon, and he looked up at me, and I guess that was the moment that he actually saw me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, but it's just another chance to trust God more. And that was what I said. I said, it's just another chance to trust God more. And he nodded, and then he looked down at the floor. I will remember this all my days. And he looks back at me, and he's crying. And I don't mean like the silent tears that slip down your cheek. I mean, I've never seen this outside of a baby. Projectile tears were spitting from his eyes like a cartoon character. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And he said, I needed to hear that today. That's every hard day, isn't it? Do you think that's what every hard day's for? Do you think that's why God allows them? So that we learn to trust him? And I just start nodding. So I'm crying, and he's not crying. And, he hands me the salmon, and I move on into my day. But Amy, you have so many amazing women that come on this show that are obedient to do these big things that God places on their hearts. And they do phenomenal, inspiring things. And I wish I had one of those stories, because I would much rather identify myself, have people think of me with one of those great stories than as the lady that's crying with Paul at the fish counter. But for the majority of us, I think that this is where we find our obedience. Our obedience comes in the form of everyday, ordinary, and not extraordinary moments. Turning to God on our hardest days is entirely an act of obedience. I think for a lot of us, responding in love towards our children and our husband when we're playing out of love, it's obedience. And when we're tempted to give in, start playing the victim card, we feel abused because we're sleep deprived, we haven't had a day off in forever, it's obedience. And one of my favorite quotes from the book that I just wrote with Amber Leah triggers was actually penned by Amber, not myself. I love learning from her. And she says this a lot in the private Facebook group we lead for women who struggle with anger as well. She says, keep doing the good parenting. When you get weary and you feel short-tempered, this is still our call. Keep doing the good parenting. Keep responding right. Keep in control of yourself. Keep being humble. Keep being gentle. Keep being kind. Keep doing the laundry. Keep running to the grocery store and feeding your little people. Keep making love to your husband when you're tired. Keep on responding right, even when your children are doing wrong. Keep on loving your husband, even when he hasn't been showing any tender love to you. And so I think that this is obedience, wearing her everyday clothes.
I love that. That is actually where my heart is, Wendy, is that it is the small moments because, and actually when I invite women to be on this podcast, I say it can be anything from being small where God leads you to say something to somebody, which I think is what, you just did, right? You gave God glory in the moment and you said the thing that God laid on your heart. All the way from, starting a nonprofit in Africa, it's all obedience and it all matters. And really, if we can't be obedient in the small things, I don't think that he's going to give us more. And it's not saying that a lot of small things are not as important as like one big thing, not at all. But I think the idea of being so obedient in the small things are so important. I'm so with you on that. And there are a lot of moments of parenting that are like that. And I love those words from her about continually being obedient, continually showing up. And it really is about loving people well, loving your family well.
Mm-hmm. And I often think of love as being a sacrifice. We think that love is what's supposed to bubble out of us. And it's just so, and it should, right? We should be so filled up and satisfied in the love of Christ that it just naturally falls out. But hello, we still have that natural person sin tendency in us. We still get weary. So how do you keep on loving? How do you keep on being patient when that fruit is slow growing in your life? And it's just an act of sacrifice. I am sacrificing love today when I don't feel like I've got enough to fill myself up.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that every time we sacrifice, it does build even more love because I think when you can sacrifice and love well, I think you see how God's ways works. Right? You're like, oh, yeah, that was better.
Yes, love wins, I think is the hashtag, right?
Right. Love wins. Like, oh, that really did go better when I chose not to yell and I chose to be patient and I chose to love well. And it makes you want to do it better the next time. And I think it's easier, we can get into these, I know in marriage, these things called the crazy cycle.
Yes.
Where, when everybody's being poor to each other, you go in this downward spiral. But I think we can get in a good spiral too, right? But it's still a struggle. So I want to talk specifically some of these chapters that you talk about, the triggers of what can make us angry. Because I think if we can identify our triggers and know and expect, what really can trip us up, it just opens our eyes. And I think we can prepare better.
That's really our heart. There are a couple of quotes in this book that I think sum it up so clearly. One of them, it's just my favorite. It says, figure out what you mean to say before you say something mean. And if we can say, outside of a moment where there's conflict, if we can say to ourselves, okay, every night my child gets out of bed umpteen times, and every night I'm taken by surprise, and every night I'm angry about it, or every night I serve something and someone at my table is complaining about what I made for dinner, and every night it takes me by surprise, and every night I respond with mean words or shaming, nasty face, whatever, then I can just say, okay, outside of that moment, how am I going to respond from here on forward? Oh, I can come up with a plan when there's not conflict. Oh, okay, I'm going to just throw out what I call a parenting script. From now on, at the dinner table, I'm going to say, sweetheart, I'm sorry that you don't care for what I serve, but this is our dinner tonight. So you have a choice. You may eat it, or you can go hungry and You always have an option to grab a banana and a glass of water before bed. But this is dinner. And can I just give you a hint that's going to help you for the rest of your life? If you complain about what people serve you, they're not going to enjoy serving you. So just remember that in your other relationships, like, when you're married one day. That's just something you should know. And so I made that plan. That's my parenting script. And if for some reason my children are always like, oh, they're surprised by it, even though I say it now every night. But slowly we're starting to see some change. Okay, mom's not going to make me something different. And I probably should find out a different way to communicate with mom because that doesn't go well. So that's really so much of what we're doing in this book is saying, let's not give in to those impulsive knee-jerk reactions. Let's choose how we want to respond in a kind way because our kids are going to do wrong, but we don't have to join them in doing wrong. We can still do right.
Yeah, and it's not about letting our kids get away with it and doing whatever they want. You actually teach correcting behavior. But I think so many of us get into the thing like, if I don't yell and I don't give a nasty face and I'm not nasty about this, then they don't understand that it's wrong.
Right. Well, so many of us, our kids don't respond until we do that. And so we don't spend a lot of time talking about this in this book, but I truly believe that we have trained our children to not respond to us until we get to that point. So we need to go up to them and say, hey, I've made a mistake. I have taught you that you don't have to listen to me until I yell. And that's bad. Like, I'm really sorry about that because that's not going to work in your job. You're going to get fired. That's not going to work at college. You're going to fail your classes. Your professor's not going to he's not going to yell at you. You've got to learn to do what you're being asked. So I'm sorry that I taught you that. So I'm going to do differently now. I'm going to parent differently, but I want you to know I'm sorry that I taught you that was okay. So just expect we're going to be doing some things a little bit different because I don't want to yell anymore. That's not me being obedient to Christ. I want to be like him. He didn't go yelling at people.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is so good because I do think it is us training our kids to only respond when we yell. So let's talk about something specific that's near and dear to my heart.
Oh no.
Yeah, so you have a whole chapter on back talking.
Oh yeah.
And so that is so hard to respond in a kind way, but also to to get them to correct them because they don't need to back talk. That's not a godly response, but the way we respond in anger is not a godly response either. So can you just talk about the back-talking chapter and how you guys sort of approach that?
Sure. Really back-talking in the chapter on whining and complaining, they go together for me because I think that whining and complaining is a precursor to back-talk. Like when they're little, it's whining, complaining, and yelling no, right? And when they get older, it's back-talk. It's being snooty. It's rolling of the eyes and letting you know that they're not going to do what they were asked. And I think that it's disrespect with words. It's more than just disobedience with their actions. It's disrespect with their words, this back talk. And so I keep saying, well, how do you talk back to their back talk? And how do you teach them to stop whining and complaining without joining them with more of your own whining and complaining? So with back talk, one of the things that I encourage moms to do is to just keep doing right in how you talk and say, oh, you know what, darling? The way you're speaking to me is unkind. And so I need to remove you. I need you to go away from us until you can talk to your brothers, your sisters, and me in a nice way. And if they're little, you take them by the hand. I'm not angry at you. I love you. That's what discipline is. You discipline those you love. So come with me. You're going to your room. It's kind of like the idea of sending fighters to their corners in a boxing match. Ding, ding, ding. Everyone to your corners. And I want you to calm down because you're not engaging in the fight in the right way. And so timeouts. Some people don't like the term timeout for whatever reason, but I think it's a gift. I love you so much that you obviously need to go calm down. And when you come back, I know that you can do this right because you love me and you want to respond to me in a right way. If it's over homework or if it's over chores but I'm not going to. Like, I'll tell my little one who's out riding the scooter in the driveway, you got to come in and clean your hands up. It's time for dinner. I'm not going to, and I won't. What? Well, you are. And so you can either choose to do it on your own right now, or you can throw a fit, and then there's going to be consequences. But I know you're smart and you can make the right choice. But in the moment, man, don't you just feel hot? Mm-hmm. Don't you, Amy?
Oh, yes. So, oh, yes, you are.
Yeah, oh, yes, you are.
There it goes. Oh, yes, you are. Hands on the hip and
right. Or
pointing
hands
the finger.
On the wrist, right? And I'll show you what you're going to do. And because I said so. And don't get me wrong, I think there's a time for because I said so. When there's lots going on. And we can talk about this later. But right now, young man, it's because I said so. So I'm not all a big, like, talk to them, make them feel good about themselves. Like, sometimes it's because I said so. But we don't have to fight just because they invite us to the fight. They want to fight? Well, then they can go to their room and hash it out with themselves. But when they come out, we're going to make sure we're working as a family. But it's really hard to teach them any of those lessons if we're engaging in the battle.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you talk about that when we respond in kind, in kind meaning like also in anger, then it takes away from the opportunity to speak into that problem, because then it's all about you and your response.
I believe down deep to my toes that they know when they've done wrong. Our children are so smart, Amy. They know when they're throwing a fit that it's the wrong thing to do. But when we meet them fit for fit and angry tear for angry tear and slamming door for slamming door, then they don't ever get to feel bad about their behavior because they feel bad about our behavior. They're like, oh, my mom is so mean. Yeah, she is. She's the adult. She should get a handle on herself. But if we would stop and let them sit there in their wrong behavior, there is the chance that they're going to feel conviction over their wrong behavior. And there's a scripture, it says, the kindness of the Lord leads us to repentance. And I believe it's true for moms and dads too. When we are kind, our children are going to feel convicted when they've done wrong. But when we are angry, when we are reacting angry to their back talk, their whining, their disrespect, their inability to turn their gaming devices off and come to the table, when we make our anger bigger than their wrongdoing, then there's no chance that they're going to feel bad about what they've done wrong, because they feel bad about how we're talking to them.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's, to me, I loved you guys talk about how it's a picture of God's response to us, how patient he is. And, he definitely has, his word and his ways set out, but how patient he is. And he has that, to me, just the quiet anger. Like I can feel sin's conviction, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not because God is yelling at me.
Right.
I think it's because there's that quiet conviction there, and he leaves me in that sin and says, deal with it.
Right.
Let's deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. And I love too, the picture that you guys gave, if we could see ourselves more as coaches. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Amber actually shares that analogy in the very first chapter, where she tells the story of when she was a teacher before she came home to be a full-time stay-at-home mom with her kids. She had a student that was really struggling, and she happened to be outside during a PE class one day, and that student that she was mentoring in her writing was supposed to be running laps, and she was lagging behind everyone. And Amber said, I took off my pumps and I just started running beside her and cheering her on and coaching her. And back to the imagery of sending your kids to their corners. Like, if you're in the ring with them and you're responding blow for blow, verbally, just with your energy, your angry energy back at their angry energy, then you can't teach them in that moment. But man, if you can slip outside of the ring and walk around to their corner while they're sitting there in their corner, you can speak as their coach and say, man, I know you can do this. I know you can respond better. I know your heart. I know that Christ in you, my little man, my little girl, is telling you that that's not the way to respond. So let's talk about it. And you coach them through it rather than yelling at them from the heat of battle.
Yeah, because you're the opponent, right? Like in the middle of
Right.
the ring, you become the opponent instead
The
of the coach. And
coach.
I love that because a coach too is interested in the person getting better. I mean, it's not that we're leaving them where they are, like, but it's from our role of coach and to give them the consequences and give them the activities that will help them mature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's so good. I was, after reading this book, it really opened my eyes to my own sin, and to quit trying to take my eyes so much off of my kids,
Yeah.
and really think about what am I teaching them from my own responses, and how can I display and model the behavior that I'm asking of them.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the book. It's already, I mean, golly, changing the way I parent, really. So I'm so thankful for it.
Wow, that's really awesome to hear. There have been so many reviews on Amazon where Amber and I are just sitting there, kind of weeping through them. Like, really? I mean, we thought maybe this would resonate with like a niche group of women, but it's not. It's not a niche group of women. It's so many moms experiencing a real gentle, convicting stirring in their spirit. Oh, wow, yeah. I'm not coaching my kids. I'm the one in the ring with them, engaging in the battle. I don't want to do that. I want to point my children to better responses, and so I need to respond better. I want my children to obey, so I need to obey Christ in my parenting. I want my children to mature, so I really need to focus on my own maturity in these stressful moments. And it's just really been a blessing to see it resonating with women, because we know that it's the truth that we've had to come to terms with in our own lives. And it's not an I have arrived place. One of the things I love about how this book is laid out is it's sort of like Stormy O'Martian's Power of a Praying Parent, where you can say, okay, I'm struggling in this one area, so I'm going to go and look up this thing, and I'm going to pray over that specific area of my kid's life. If you're struggling specifically with your child's ADHD, there's a chapter for that, because I'm telling you, sister, that's a trigger. Or
Oh yeah, my son has ADHD, so I
yeah,
fully
you know.
appreciated that chapter. That'll make you crazy.
That can make you crazy. And your child's issue gives you issues that you did not know you had. And the same
Absolutely.
as depression. If you're struggling with depression, you can go and say, where's that chapter on depression? I need a refresher course. And we talk about you. We don't talk about your child's behavior. We talk about you, mom. And anyway, so I'm just really enjoying the fact that it's a continued work in my own life. And the Lord continues to minister to me in these places. And I just love inviting other women into the conversation.
Again, thanks so much. Well, thanks for sharing that. I really hope that helps people, because I think, like I said from the beginning, I think this is a huge calling that we have, and it really is all about being obedient to the person that God has called us to be in our role of parents, and it's also teaching our children how to be obedient in the right way.
Right.
So, if people want to find you or want to find the book, how can they do that?
Let's see. If you want to find me, then you can go to wendyspeake.com. And if you want to find the book, go to Amazon. It was published by the good women over at the Mob Society. Mob stands for Mothers of Boys. And this is their first book that they have done all of the work to do the publishing on. So it's at Amazon, Triggers. And I hope you enjoy it. It's in paperback. It's in Kindle. And there's also a PDF copy. If you go to the Mob Society /Triggers, you can find it there.
So fantastic. Well, thanks again for being here, Wendy.
Yeah, thanks for all you do, Amy. We're all encouraged to be obedient in our moment-to-moment lives, and you're cheering us on in that, so thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Wendy. I enjoyed the book so much and was really just reminded again today that we all have this call to treat people with love and respect. And, you might not be a mom, but this is just absolutely still applicable. We're called to speak truth to people, but we are also called to love people and to be kind. And I just think about Christ and how, when he was on earth, he absolutely confronted sin, but he always did it with patience and kindness. And, I never imagined Jesus, slamming the door in somebody's face or throwing things across the room or yelling like a temper tantrum. We are called to deliver both truth and grace and do it in a graceful, kind way. And it's in these small moments when we interact with people, especially our children, that we can choose to believe that God's ways are better and to obey him and to respond in kind. And I really think you could glean a lot out of this book, even if you're not a mom. So I do hope you get to pick that up. I also want to remind you to check out the show notes over on featherspodcast.com. And don't forget the online shop where you can get some feather-inspired products to help support the show. So guys, thanks for being here this week, and we will see you next time on Feathers.